It's happening again.
The words struggled to leave my mother's mouth as she stood, shaking in the kitchen. My brother, Jimmy, and I eyed her curiously. Before we could respond, my father stood up and asked her, "Are you sure?" His typically charismatic and whimsical tone now buried beneath a new voice built from panic and concern.
Yes, I'm sure,
she replied. My father stood still for a moment in disbelief, whispered something to my mother, then turned to face us. "Boys, there's a man coming to town. You're going to see him around. Maybe in the street, maybe on a park bench, maybe even in the corner of your bedroom at night." I looked at my brother and was met with a mirrored reflection of confusion. We looked back to my father. "Listen to me, boys. No matter what he looks like this time, do not mention anything about his appearance." My mind raced, unsure if my parents were losing their collective minds or if this was some sort of out-of-character joke they were playing. I spoke up, breaking the silence. "Dad, what are you talking about? Who's coming to town?" My father approached us. He placed one hand on Jimmy's shoulder and the other on mine. "I know this doesn't make a lot of sense, or any sense for that matter, but I need you both to be strong and mature for me, okay? If you see a man around town that looks different, promise me you will not say anything about how he looks. Not to me, not to your mom, not to each other or anyone. Not even a whisper. Got it?" Jimmy and I looked to each other and then back to Dad. We nodded. The next few days proceeded like normal. We went to school, came home, and played outside with our friends. Mom and Dad never brought up that night. For some reason, we never felt like bringing it back up to them. I went to bed that night content, not knowing that tomorrow would lead to the most horrific experience of my life. The school bus stopped at the corner. Jimmy and I raced home to drop off our backpacks and grabbed our baseball gear. We were meeting the other guys at the Diamond for a pickup game. The weather was perfect. I'll never forget that. Jimmy and I rode as fast as we could pedal down the street and onto the sidewalk. We arrived at the Diamond to find the other guys already waiting for us. We ditched our bikes and sprinted onto the field. When it was my turn to bat, I recited the words my dad had taught me. Hands back, eye on the ball, swing through the ball. I repeated my mantra as the ball came in. The second the bat made contact, I knew that I had crushed it. The ball soared into the sky to the depths of left field. Mike was fast, but even as the fastest kid on the block, he couldn't catch this one. He sprinted towards the ball as it came crashing back down to earth as I ran the bases. I grinned ear to ear as I rounded third to home. Then the cheers from my team ended abruptly as the world seemed to pause in silence. We all looked in unison toward left field. The baseball sat at the feet of a man, at least what resembled a man. Mike stood and stared, glancing back at us. We all inched closer for a better look. The thing that stood in the field wore a black suit jacket, black pants, and a top hat. But it wasn't a man at all. It was, in all respect, a balloon. Someone had tied together a series of balloons to create a sort of ballooned animal human being and dressed it in clothes. The bulbous yellow head was oversized, with red balloon eyes and a big blue grin. It had a green nose sticking out like a ripe cucumber, and what looked to be drawn-on ears. Mike burst out laughing, breaking the silence. A sound I'll never forget. He dropped to the grass and rolled in hysterics. He got back up and stared the balloon creature in its inflated eyeballs. Is this the man our parents have been so scared of? A fucking balloon? His roaring laughter continued. Despite it being very windy that day, the balloon man didn't even flinch. It just stood, grinning its blue grin. Mike poked the balloon man with his finger and jolted back, grabbing his finger in pain. Jimmy tugged me by the shirt. "I think we should go home." I nodded in agreement. We rode home in silence. At dinner, we did not mention the incident. Tension filled the kitchen like our parents already knew. That night, a shrill scream filled the street and jolted me out of bed. I ran downstairs, Jimmy tailing behind me. My dad yelled for us to stay inside. We didn't listen. Mike's mom stood outside screaming and pacing the street. Lights from the neighboring houses turned on one by one until we saw. Mike's mother held something in her arms. The neighbors stood from their lawns and gasped when they saw. She was holding a balloon version of Mike. It was even wearing his clothes. She continued her screaming, demanding to know where her son was, pleading with the neighborhood. She dropped to her knees, squeezing balloon impersonation in her arms. The pop echoed throughout the street, and Mike's mother sat on the pavement.
I was living in California at the time. I was driving to my parents' house for the holidays. They lived in a different state than mine, so I had to drive there. On the way, I saw an old bar that had a sign saying free drinks inside. And you know, I'm not a very tall and structured woman. I'm more on the skinnier side, and I try not to go out too much. But I thought to myself, why not? I mean, I am thirsty. So I went inside the bar, and when I got inside, there weren't very many people there. Just one man sitting at one of the tables and the bartender. When I look back on this, I realized that the bartender and the guy were making mysterious glances at each other. As I walk up to the bartender, the man sitting at the table stood up. I glanced over at him and he was staring at me straight in the eyes with a creepy smile plastered across his face. I asked the bartender what his problem was, and the bartender just innocently told me, "I don't know, he just walked in right after you parked your car." And then it dawned on me, he only came in here because of me. I ran outside to check my car, but it was gone. I knew that the man who was sitting at the table stole my car. I ran back inside to tell the bartender, but when I got there, he had a look on his face like he already knew. As I started to gather all the information in my head, I realized that the bartender and the man sitting at the table were in on this together. Once I realized this, the man lunged towards me and had that creepy smile plastered across his face. I turned around and ran for my dear life. I was running what felt like for hours, but it was most likely minutes. I looked back and saw that he was just inches from me. I turned back and saw a police car, and to my luck, there was a police officer in the front seat. I started waving my hands frantically to get his attention, but to no luck, he was on his radio to another police officer. His face changed as he started to drive away. I turned around again to see if he was still following me, and he wasn't. I breathed a sigh of relief, but as soon as I turned around, both of them were standing in front of me with the same creepy smile. I started to run the other way, but now there was two of them. I ran for about 3 minutes more before he caught me and covered my mouth with the bartender's hand. They were dragging me back to my car, but I could hear the police sirens in the distance. The bartender pushed me onto the floor before running away. The police cars were seen in seconds. That was the last thing I remember from that night. I think I just blacked out. When I woke up, I was at my parents' house. There were police officers in the dining room speaking to my parents. I came in and the police officer started talking to me. He pretty much said that the men who stole my car escaped from a nearby mental institution. They were going to kidnap me and take my car, and then take me to an abandoned house that was near the bar. The policeman that was on the radio earlier was responding to a noise complaint in my parents' neighborhood. They never found the men at that bar, and I haven't been to a rundown bar ever since. I'm Aksa. This incident happened when I was 12 years old. My parents were going out for dinner at a famous restaurant, and then we were planning to go to my uncle's house while I stayed with my best friend. Let's call her Karen. She was a very nice person. We planned to do many things, and we did watch movies and played video games. When we got bored, we decided to go to a nearby abandoned house, which was literally the worst thing we ever decided. Now, just for your information, it was a haunted house according to the rumors. The moment we entered, I had an eerie feeling and suggested Karen to leave the house ASAP, but she denied immediately. She was kinda an adventurous person. We suddenly found a map in the corner of the living room, which was weird, and it read go to the bathroom and go from the stairs, and that's how you'll get to the room upstairs. Karen and I were literally so curious as to what was upstairs in that room. We went up there and saw a crying baby. We were startled when we thought that someone must have left him here all alone. Me and Karen went towards the baby, and Karen tried to pick him up, but when she did, a woman who was drooling from her mouth and remarkably had blue eyes jumped from nowhere and grabbed her hand and slapped her several times and stabbed her in the leg 3 times. I don't know why I couldn't move, but I tried my best and threw a glass bottle at her, which was right beside me. She was badly hurt and was crying like a baby. I grabbed Karen's hand and we tried to escape from the house, but that maniac woman pushed me and my head was literally bleeding. Karen grabbed me, and when we went out of the house and reached my house as fast as possible, we were sitting in the living room, if I remember correctly, when we heard the glass window break and that mad woman was shouting and broke into our living room. Karen called the cops while I tried to walk with my broken head. The woman was shouting, "How dare you touch my baby?" And she was repeating it again and again. She pulled mine and Karen's hair and tried to pull us down, but Karen threw her phone at her and we ran to my room. Cops came and fortunately caught the woman. Karen was badly hurt and unfortunately didn't survive. I cried every day for her. My parents were there too. 2 weeks later, cops called me and said that the woman liked to collect dead bodies and that she never left people who tried to touch her child. I was scared but relaxed. It's been 4 years now, and thankfully nothing has happened. Hi, I'm Christy, and I'm 15 years old. I'm more of a night person, so I pretty much stay up very late. This is why my sleep schedule is so messed up. I usually go to bed around 3 to 5 a.m. Sometimes I don't even sleep at all. But this experience changed everything for me. It was 4 a.m. one night when I was watching my favorite series. I just turned off the TV and went to bed. Suddenly, I started getting chills for no reason. I just brushed it off and thought it was just me being cold. But then, I started hearing very strange noises coming from my window, like a very slow tapping. I got scared and I didn't want to check, so I just closed my eyes thinking everything would just go away. But unfortunately it didn't. It became louder and a bit faster. I just turned away from the window and hoped that everything would be over soon. But suddenly, I felt a very heavy breathing in my ear. I got so scared, but I wouldn't even dare to open my eyes. I just pretended to be asleep. I started sweating heavily and trembling a bit too. I passed out right after. I woke up the next day thinking about everything that happened that night was just a dream. Suddenly I felt a sharp pain in my leg. When I looked down, I saw scratches all over them as if a creature with sharp nails tried to claw me. I didn't bother telling my mom because I knew that she wouldn't believe me even if I showed her the scratches. I didn't tell anyone about the incident. And when they asked about my leg, I would just tell them I accidentally fell off my bike. But I can't help but wonder, what was that thing that breathed in my ear? And what were those tapping noises? I still have no explanation for everything that happened, but one thing I know is that I won't go to bed late anymore. Some of you might not believe me, but that's okay. I wouldn't believe me either, but I can't help but wonder, what would have happened if I opened my eyes? Would I be dead?
When I was a junior in college, I used to work at a graveyard that's pretty famous for ghost sightings. I was 18 at the time, doing extra work to pay for college. I was with another coworker who was telling me she was having issues with her husband and her kids, just talking about how bad her life was going. She was mopping the floors, and I was taking out the trash from the hallway. The hallway was very long, and after hours the lights would turn off. I picked up a few bags and took them outside to the parking lot area to throw them in the big dumpsters. I'm pretty short, so I had to climb a ladder to dispose of the trash. When I turned around to go back to the building, I saw my coworker holding the mop, looking out towards me. And above her, there was this smoke-like cloud. It was gray and translucent. I immediately felt the hairs on the back of my neck rise and a big node in my gut. As I was walking towards the entrance of the building, I heard a whisper behind me. I couldn't make out what it said, and that feeling in my gut was getting worse. I rushed inside and locked the door behind me. I took a minute to breathe and called my coworker to see if she was done. I looked for her, but only found the bucket and mop in the middle of the hallway, as if she just dropped everything and left. I then called my supervisor to tell her that I couldn't find my coworker, and it seemed that she just suddenly left the building. I never saw her again. It's been 6 years since that incident, and I still remember that night, and I'm still curious about what could have made my coworker drop everything and leave in the middle of the night.
Hello everyone, my name's Kali, and I'm 18 years old. I have light fuchsia hair and brown eyes. But what I'm going to tell you happened 7 years ago. I had brown hair then. Back then, my precious grandpa had been sick for quite some time, and at last he came to rest. I was heartbroken, but my granny was worse. Since my grandparents lived alone, we moved in with her to ease her fear of an old woman being alone in a big house. Me and my brother shared the same bedroom, which was next to my grandpa's room, and his room was taken by my grandma. Some days passed, things were finally starting to feel normal until one certain night. I used to sleep early, since I was an 11-year-old student, but sometimes I woke up in the middle of the night to drink some water, and I was fully awake. It was always scary because it was too dark and quiet, but Grandma's snoring always broke the silence. That night, though, something very strange happened. I got up, drank some water from the bottle I have next to my bed, and out of the blue, instead of Granny's snoring, I heard Grandpa's. At first I was startled, but I thought I might have misheard. But no, since I was fully awake, I got up and stood next to my bed. I even slapped my cheeks. Yes, it was Grandpa's usual loud snoring. Now you'll think, how do I know whose snoring that was? Both my grandparents were snoring when I was sleeping with them, so I know it very well. I got so scared that moment and I started praying. I looked at my brother next to my bed and I calmed a bit, but the snoring didn't stop. There was no way I was going to check on it, so I went to sleep. Next morning, I told my mother what I had experienced, but of course she said I was probably half asleep. Even if she didn't believe me, I knew she would eventually since she had an experience of her own when she was younger. Anyways, I'm not sure what I heard that night, but it still bothers me to this day.
This happened when I was 15 years old. We had a kind of security camera fitted outside our apartment, which enabled us to see who was at the door. One day, our mom received a video from an unknown number. On seeing the video, our mom was shocked. The video showed footage from our outside camera. It was footage of me coming home after playing cricket. The question was, who was the guy that sent the video? And how did he get our footage? Did he hack our cameras? We were terrified. We thought of complaining to the cops, but then changed the plan as it wasn't that serious. It was 11 p.m. on a Monday, and me and my family members were sitting in the living room. My dad was at work. Suddenly the doorbell rang. We were surprised because we weren't expecting anyone at this time of night, so my mom cautiously opened the door. There was a guy standing there that we had never seen before. He was tall, well-built, and was probably middle-aged. He was looking at my mom with creepy, wide-open eyes and said, "Open the door, ma'am." My mom asked him who he was and what he wanted while peering through the safety door behind our main door. Then I remembered that I had forgotten to lock the safety door after playing. The man didn't reply to my mom's question, but smiled, opened the safety door, and tried to get in. My mom tried to close the main door, but the man was strong. I was terrified. The man almost got in, but thanks to my elder sister and her quick response, she hit the man with my cricket bat. The man fell down unconscious. We called the police and they came and took the man away. The watchman for our building was suspended for allowing the man inside. The police searched the man's house, which was an old abandoned shop. They found videos of our CCTV footage, so it was clear that this was the guy who sent my mom the video. The man is now serving time in prison. To this day, I wonder who that man was. What did he want? And what would have happened if my sister hadn't hit him?
I remember I was standing inside a medieval castle. I could see the sky, but the sun wasn't in sight because it was a very cloudy day. I remember seeing there were a lot of children in the area. Some of the children far from me were lined up facing somewhere, while the children near me were scattered. Then, a woman came and led us to fall in line. All of the children followed her, and I figured I should follow her. Some time passed, and I don't know how I figured it out, but I thought that woman must have been a mother figure to the children, and that's why they followed her. So I started to get comfortable around her. As I looked to my left, I realized we were all lined up. Then I started to wonder to myself, why am I in a medieval castle in the first place? I realized this must be a dream. I don't know what got me, but I started to scream, trying to wake myself up. I kept telling myself, this must be a dream. This must be a dream. The mother figure who was already standing in front of us looked over to me. She laughed and jumped on me, causing me to fall on my back. I remember the children circled around me while the woman was standing above me. I looked at her and told her, "You're not real. This is a dream." She looked at me as if she was shocked that I figured out this was not real. She laughed maniacally and leaned on me closer. I was so scared that I started to say prayers in my sleep. She continued to laugh even louder while the children just stared at me. Then, suddenly, I woke up. I was breathing heavily and sweating profusely. If you think the weirdness ended there, it didn't. The light in my room was turned off and the door was opened slightly to let some of the light from the hallway enter my room. My bed was near the door and the phone was close to my bed. I checked the time and it was around 3 a.m. I could feel a chill in the room, but I didn't dare to move. I was too scared, and I was trying to process what had just happened. My eyes were half open. I felt someone pulling the blanket up to my shoulders, but I snuggled in the warmth of my blanket since it was so cold. I noticed that the person who placed the blanket on me went to the direction of my sister's room, so I thought it was my sister. But then I also heard footsteps coming from my mother's room, and I went to my sister's room. I thought, who could that be? I called for my mom asking if it was her, and she did not respond. I called my sister, and she came into my room. I asked her if she covered me with a blanket. She said no. Then I asked her if she came from our mother's room. She said yes. I asked my sister if she's the only one in her room. Again, she said yes. I felt the chill run up my spine. I couldn't figure out who covered me with the blanket. It couldn't be my mother because she was fast asleep in her room. And it couldn't be my sister because she just came out of our mother's room.
To start this story off, there are a few things for clarification. This is told from a 6th grade male perspective. This story happened 2 years ago. I lived in a little town and went to a public school. Every Friday, a lot of other students at my school loved to walk to the nearest grocery store and frozen yogurt store after all of our classes were done. Everyone would power through their week at school to be able to walk every Friday. It was one of the highlights of going to school. It was a nice walk to the frozen yogurt shop. You would walk through fields of grass, past a fire station, past our local rec center, and that would eventually lead you to the yogurt shop. It was a very crowded place most of the time, so we would also go to the gas station nearby and the grocery store. But the yogurt shop had some of the best hangout areas. Me and my friends walked so much that it practically became a tradition, but everything had changed from that point forward. Whilst we were walking, I thought I was seeing things, but always noticed that there was a small Honda Civic nearby everywhere we went. They hadn't thought much of it, but I definitely knew that was a red flag. Not wanting to ruin the mood, we kept moving forwards. 10 to 20 minutes later, we had arrived near the frozen yogurt store and went to our usual spot. I may have not stated that the frozen yogurt store was in a type of store complex, 2 stories, big. It was surrounded by tons of other stores. We went to our usual spot, but something felt wrong. That Honda Civic was on the road right nearby. That was red flag number 2. I quickly said, let's go back to the 2-story complex. And they were saying, why? And what's wrong with our usual? Not trying to make them worried, I said, I know a better spot. Here's where the story really escalates. We started walking up to this other spot that was at the 2nd floor of the complex. We were having a good time at this spot, and I eventually had forgotten about the Honda Civic. One by one, it was time to head home. All 3 of my friends had left before myself because my parents were still at work and couldn't pick me up yet. I was starting to feel bored, so I moved around the complex. I was running around, acting like a fool, but was genuinely having fun. I turned the corner to the next hallway, and I muttered to myself, oh shit. There was a really tall man at the end of the corridor. He looked about 6'5" to 7 feet tall and was wearing some type of fedora. He looked unkempt and dirty. Thinking he may just be homeless, I started to walk by him. I was just about to walk past him, and this man said, I'll give you a 10-second head start. I've been watching you through my car. He started smiling like a maniac. I felt my heart in my throat and was very confused, but this didn't feel like a good situation. Turning around, I asked, why me? What did I do? He just glared at me. A couple of seconds passed and he muttered, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I started to sweat and thought to myself, and he told me, better get running, or it'll be over for you. At that very moment, he started to move his hands behind his back and he pulled out a pocket knife. I felt all of my hopes and dreams die in that very moment. Feeling like I was about to throw up, I started booking it, running as fast as I ever had before. I looked behind me, but he was nowhere near far behind, almost a couple of feet away. I thought to myself, I'm gonna die. I'm really gonna die. I heard a blood-curdling scream from behind me. He was even closer. I felt a rush of adrenaline as I jumped off the 2nd story and had safely fallen onto a patch of grass. But I had hurt my leg, so not really that safely. I looked back up to the window and I could finally see his face without the fedora covering his face. He had a huge grin on his face. I ran into the frozen yogurt store. If I didn't, he would for sure finish me off. I ran inside and exclaimed, "Call 911!" They had a look of confusion on their face. I explained everything that happened and what the man looked like. The police arrived shortly after and I explained what he looked like, and also reported the Honda Civic. These police officers went searching after using me for information. Unfortunately, they never found him. I will never forget this experience, and it truly haunts me every night.
Hi, I just want to share a story of my cousin's roommate since I really enjoy watching the Wansi channel. I'm going to represent my cousin's roommate in this story. You can call me Steph. I'm a graduating student of medicine, so as our final requirement, we had to internship at assigned hospitals. Sometimes the hospitals were nearby my house, but mostly they were far away, so I didn't have a choice but to rent a space for a little while. This particular time, I was assigned to a place I had never been before. I called my friend Nikki to ask where she was assigned, and luckily, she had the same scheduled place and dates as me, so we agreed to rent a room together and become roommates. We found a suitable boarding house. It was clean and really comfortable. Plus, it was just one bus stop away from the hospital, so it was really convenient. Everything was fine until one evening. I was really tired after work, so I decided to get some McDonald's nearby. After that, I went back to our room to unwind after a long day. In my bed was the top bunk and Nikki slept on the lower bunk. While I was laying on my bed, I messaged Nikki to ask her what time she would be home since we really hadn't seen each other lately at the hospital. And as I was waiting for her reply, I was just scrolling aimlessly on Facebook for a few minutes when I heard the door open. Now the door was locked, but I didn't really think about it or pay much attention since Nikki had a set of keys. Also, I was watching a funny video, so I didn't even think to look up to see what was going on. Then I felt the bunk bed move a little bit, so I figured she probably got into her bed too. After watching my funny video, I put down my phone and turned to her and asked, "Where have you been?" She said, "I went to the convenience store to buy food for us for our breakfast tomorrow." We had a normal girly chit-chat like we always do, but then it was time to go to sleep and she asked me to turn off the lights. The switch was beside the door, so it was about 5 meters away from the bed. I was tired and groggy, and too tired and lazy to get up and shut it off. I said, "You're closer than me. Why don't you shut it off?" But her voice became weaker, and she said, "I can't. My head is aching. I want to sleep." So I got up frustrated, and I was like, "I'll just shut it off." And I glanced over at her, and the bed was empty. I moved my eyes around the room quickly, thinking that I must be seeing things. She was just there in her bed. I looked around the room to see if she was playing a prank on me or bluffing. I even checked our bathroom, but it was empty. My hands started to shake, and I couldn't move. I was so shocked and scared, because who have I been talking to this whole time? Their voice was the same as Nikki, and I even felt a presence. Then all of a sudden, my phone rang, and it was Nikki. She said, "Sorry, Steph, I wasn't able to reply to you earlier because I was really busy at the hospital. I'm here at McDonald's near the building, so I'll just wait here." I quickly hung up the phone and just ran out of the house with my pajamas on, and I was barefoot. I didn't even care who was staring at me. I was so frantic and scared. Who was that talking to me in the bedroom? I don't have a third eye, but I just talked to a ghost or some type of entity. After that incident, I always wait for Nikki after work, because now I'm just terrified to be alone in that room. And I also had nightmares after that, like someone's watching me while I sleep. I finished up my internship there and left, and returned to my hometown. I just really hope the next tenant of that room doesn't experience the same chilling experience as I did.
Hello. I'm going to tell you a story that happened to me in the 9th grade. I'm in the 10th grade right now, but I still remember this like it was yesterday. I was walking home from school on a Friday around 2:50 or 3 o'clock. It seemed like a normal day, and not too much was happening. I got home and locked the door behind me and went to my room. I went to the kitchen and grabbed me an orange before I went upstairs to study. I went upstairs to study for a while and then watched some TV. My parents weren't home because of a business trip that will last a week, and they've been gone for 2 days. My neighbors would check on me here and there, but not too often. It was getting late, around 9:30 p.m. I called my friend Travis to come and chill with me. He came about 9:50 with some snacks like Takis, Dr. Pepper, and donuts. After an hour of watching TV, we talked about sports, etc. Travis got up to use the bathroom and yelled my name from the bathroom. I went to come check on him to see why he was yelling. And then I saw there was a pile of poop laying on the floor. A surge of rage went down my body. Who the hell could have done this? Because I was the only one home, and I don't own any pets. After a minute of deep thinking, I started to get scared. I wondered, what if someone else did this that wasn't supposed to be here? After 5 minutes, we cleaned the poop up and went outside to throw it away. On my way to take the trash out, I saw that my gate to the backyard was open. And then it hit me. I ran in the house to get Travis to find out he wasn't in there anymore. I started to freak out in my head, but I tried my hardest not to show it. I looked all around to find my parents' door was wide open. I walked in there, and the window was wide open. I walked slowly and looked out the window to see that there was an opening that led to the forest. I went in and grabbed my dad's baseball bat and a flashlight and ran outside. I saw there were tracks in the dirt. I followed them, praying that Travis was okay. It was about 10 minutes of running. Then I saw a tent and a little outhouse too. I saw a shadow of a person and prayed it was Travis. As I went and opened it, I heard the outhouse door open. And to my surprise, I saw a tall, dirty man step out. As soon as I saw him, I instantly charged at him and started swinging my bat at him. I'm a fairly built teen who plays a lot of sports, so this wasn't hard. I hit him one good time in the middle of his face. He dropped down fast with a bloody nose. I opened the tent to see Travis with duct tape around his mouth and hands. I had a pocket knife strapped on my shorts and cut him free. He didn't even say a word. He just got up and we both ran back home as fast as we could. When we got home, I instantly tried to call the cops. The cops came in about 10 minutes and went looking in the forest. After 30 minutes, the police found the man talking to himself, hitting his head on a tree. When they came back, the police had informed us that he was a nutcase, wandering, harassing people, forcing them to live with them. He was insane and needed immediate help. I hope that he can get the help that he needs so he doesn't do anything that deranged.
My mom was always good at pretending to be a normal person. She owned a hot dog stand and always had that fake smile on her face. But I knew who she really was. When she came home from work, she'd close all the curtains and make me pray for hours on our hard wooden floor. It was so painful, and my knees would get really sore, but my mom didn't care. She said it was the only way of keeping bad spirits and demons away. As I grew older, I realized my mom was crazy. And at age 14, I finally got up enough courage to tell her I didn't want to pray anymore. I said I was sick of having bruised knees, and I even told her that spirits and ghosts don't actually exist. But I shouldn't have said that, because suddenly my mom looked at me like I was some kind of stranger. She got one of those huge crystals that she kept for protection and held it up to her eye to look at me through it. "This is bad," she said. "You're full of evil energy. We must pray." I'd heard enough. I went to my room and locked the door. My mom could be really scary, but what choice did I have anyway? I was too young to leave home, and nobody would care if I told them my mom believed in ghosts. So I knew I was trapped, but I never expected what happened next. That same night, I was woken up by the sound of someone trying to open my door. I thought it might be an intruder, so I asked, "Mom, is that you?" She replied, "Yes, sweetie, it's me. Please, open the door. I'm worried about you." I didn't want to let her in, but she was my mom, and that's why I opened the door for her. But then she immediately flew at me, screaming, "You're the devil! Leave my daughter, foul beast!" She was waving a large crucifix around, and I saw that she had sharpened the bottom to a point. Was she trying to stab me? I've never been so scared in my life. But then I picked up my blanket and threw it over my mom, so I had enough time to escape and run outside. Luckily, I ran into a jogger on the street who called the police for me. Shortly after, my mom got arrested. She told them I was possessed, and she was only trying to save my soul by doing an exorcism to chase the devil out of me. Wow, how kind of her. Unfortunately for my mom, the judge saw things differently. He ordered a psychiatric assessment for her, and now she's in a psychiatric ward until she's cured. But I don't think that will ever happen. Just recently, she attacked one of the guards because she thought he was a demon, and now she has to spend most of her time locked up in her room. It's sad because she only gets 1 hour a day to walk outside, and when they do let her out, she's heavily sedated. Recently, I went to see her for the first time. My heart was pounding like crazy, but all she could say was, "Is it you? Is it really you and not the devil?" It was so sad to see her like that. She looked so old, like she'd just been through hell. I couldn't cope. I burst into tears and left. Luckily, my Aunt Becky was waiting for me outside, because after my mom got locked away, my aunt legally adopted me, and it's fair to say that she is the parent I've always dreamed of. Recently, she asked me what I wanted to do with my life, and I told her I wanted to produce horror movies someday. If my mom had heard that, she would have punished me severely. But my aunt is different, and that's why she instead bought me a camera so I could start working on my first amateur horror movie. It's a bit like Paranormal Activity, just lower quality. So I know I've got to learn a lot, but with my aunt's help, I'm sure I'll get there.
I'm 25 right now. This happened when I was about 15 or 16. One night I was skating on my skateboard. It was about 7 or 8 p.m. It was awfully rainy and muddy, and I had skated in some mud. The mud was all over my shoes, so I decided to clean them off in a puddle. I set my skateboard down and went to a puddle that was on the opposite side of a car, which was weird because no one else was there. I chalked it up to someone just parking there so they could take a smoke out in the woods nearby. As I was washing off my shoes, I heard a sound. The sound of a board being picked up and flipped over. I quickly turned around and saw someone picking up my board and doing something with the wheels. I was freaked out and said, "Hey, what are you doing with my skateboard?" They looked at me and ran off. I was pretty scared, so I grabbed my board and headed home. I decided not to tell my parents as I thought it wasn't a big deal. Maybe just someone trying to take it, like a petty thief. I brushed it off and ate dinner. A few hours later, I got tired and decided to go to bed. A few hours later, I woke up to the sound of glass shattering. I got up quickly and grabbed my baseball bat. I ran out into the living room and saw the same guy who had done something with my skateboard. But I saw something in his coat pocket. It looked sharp. I screamed, "What the hell are you doing in my house? I can call the police, you know." He said, "Oh, but you don't want to do that. I have a knife." I ran upstairs and grabbed my phone and called the cops. 5 minutes later, they showed up. They arrested the man, and one cop came up to me. "Hey, we found him upstairs waiting for you outside your room. Apparently, you put a tracking device on one of the wheels in your skateboard. He was planning to kill you and sell your organs on the deep web." He went to jail, and I never saw him again. But I still get chills whenever I think of what could have happened to me.
This happened to me 2 years ago, and I still think about it to this day. One summer, my family and I decided to visit my favorite cousin and her family because we were bored at home. We were so excited to finally see each other after so long. My uncle thought it would be a good idea to take us to the pool to beat the summer heat. We left the house around 5:30 to the community pool. When we got there, there was barely anyone there but us and 2 or 3 other people. So we put our belongings on the pool chair and jumped into the pool. After a few minutes of talking and playing in the pool with my cousin, something caught my eye. As I glanced over, not far from us, there was a scrawny boy with brown hair. He had on swim trunks, and he looked like he was a teenager. I noticed his eyes were red and puffy, and his face looked like he was about to cry. I didn't really think much of it and tried to forget about him while I was talking to my cousin, who apparently didn't notice. But every time I would glance over at him, I would notice every few minutes he would glance at his watch nervously. which was bulky and black on his skinny wrist. 642, 651, 702, 713, 718. Around 7:30, when the sun was beginning to set, we decided to go home. Before we left, we took one last glance to see if he was still there, and sure enough he was, in the same position with his eyes fixated on the water below. It seemed like he was alone, and he had been there before we had arrived. Then me and my cousin went home and we forgot all about this strange experience. A few days later, we got the news that a teenage boy had taken his own life by drowning in the community pool. I was extremely shocked because it reminded me of the same boy I saw days ago at the same pool. One of the neighbors told us that the police reports claimed the night before he was on the dark web. He met a strange man who threatened him to complete a mission before sunset, or else he would find him and kill him and his family. The mission was for him to go to the community pool and kill someone there and bring them the dead body of a young girl. Perplexed and anxious, he decided to sacrifice himself instead. The police couldn't track down the man from the dark web, and I still wonder to this day what would have happened if the boy decided to actually complete the strange man's mission. What if the person he was supposed to kill was me or my cousin?
My name is Christine, and this story happened when I was in the 10th grade. I was 15 years old at the time. I remember this one classmate I had, Jessica, who had a really weird obsession with my other classmate, John. Jessica would do anything for him, and they were fine together for a few days. Until one day, when John, my classmate, told me he liked me. He said it in front of everyone, including Jessica. I saw the anger and shock on Jessica's face, her eyes fixed on me weirdly. She was looking at me from head to toe. Then, without saying anything, she went home. The next day, I had a weird start to my morning. I had to wear the exact same outfit I wore the previous day to school since I didn't have anything else to wear, as all my other clothes were in the laundry. As I got to school, I saw Jessica, and she was wearing the exact same outfit I was wearing. She copied me from how I styled my hair, the way I dressed, and the way I acted. It even got to the point where she would post the exact same things I posted on social media. There was this one time when I posted the new iPhone I got for my birthday, and not even an hour later, she posted the exact same thing, saying she had gotten a new phone for her cousin's birthday, which was probably a made-up story, and she even used the exact same caption I used in my post. 3 days later, I bought 2 chocolate Labradors, the cutest puppies, and I posted them on social media. And, as expected, not too long after, Jessica posted the same thing. She bought 2 puppies of the exact same breed that I had bought. 2 weeks later, both of my dogs got into a fight with a large group of dogs that lived on the street. Both of my Labradors died from horrible injuries from the bites of those vicious dogs. I posted on social media that both of my dogs had died, crying nonstop while sharing the news. Now, this is where the story gets scary. A few days later, around 2 a.m. in the morning, she posted that both of her dogs had died as well, and she said that they fell from somewhere really high and died when they hit the ground. And I'm positive that the story she told was a lie. She captioned her post, "Rest in peace, Moxie. You may be gone, but you will always have a permanent place in my heart," which was the exact same caption I had put on my post about my dog, but my dog's name was Mochi. Jessica just replaced the name of my dog with the name of her dog. And to this day, I still don't know what she did to those poor puppies. This happened 2 years ago when I was with my parents and siblings. We went out to go shopping. The time we came back, it's about 9:30 p.m. because usually the mall closed at 10 p.m. When we got back home, we were shocked to see what happened to our house. The whole house was like a mess. The windows were broke and the door were smashed through a hole in the middle. My father, who was a very good basketball coach, tell me and my siblings to go in the car while my mother contacted the police. Later, the police arrived and they started to search for some clues because recently in our city there is a lot of house robbery going on. But then, this time, our house was robbed differently. The robber did not steal any of the money. In fact, they only steal our family photos. Our family photos were plain, and photo frame was made out of wood that my dad made it himself. Sooner or later, the police found a hole underneath our couch. They found out the hole was leading to an alleyway nearby. We have no idea how it got there. A few weeks later, I was hanging out with my friends, and I was about to go back home. By the time it was 7:30 p.m. and it's raining. At that time, I was walking home because the place we chose to go to hang out was quite close to my house. It will take around 10 minutes to arrive at my house. So I walk home with an umbrella, and the time the streetlights weren't functioning, some were and some are not. As I was walking and I heard the notifications from my phone, and I saw my mom's text saying that I must come home now or no dinner for me tonight. So I quickly put my phone back in my pocket and started walking. But at that very moment, I saw a man. The man was holding a picture and was looking at me and the picture on and on. I stood there thinking that someone was behind me, but no, it was only me and him. I stood there shivering my legs because I saw him holding a pocket knife like he was going to kill somebody. Suddenly, I remembered that there was another way to walk back to my house, but that road will take me 2 times as long as the road I was taking. But I wasn't hesitating, and I slowly back off. But when I moved just a bit, I saw him taking his move and started walking towards me. I was terrified, and I run home quickly, and I closed the umbrella just for some extra protection. The man was running very fast, but he couldn't catch me since I was the #1 female runner in my school. I quickly ran home and rang the bell. As soon as my mom opened the door, I quickly ran in and shut the door. My mother asked me, "What was that all about?" I told her to lock all the windows and the door, and I'll explain to her. After telling everything to her, she was shocked. She quickly called the cops, and they arrived shortly. They interviewed me, and they started searching for him. A week later, the police called us and tell us that they found him. He said that he was actually one of the citizens in our city. He have a lot of pictures of people's family photos. He told us why he wanted the photos, and the truth shocked me. Most of the family photos has red circles around young girl, and one of them is me. His plan were actually to kill young girls like me and steal every valuable thing we have, and he targeted young girls because young girls are easy to catch and rob. The police found out that he already targeted 7 young girls, and their bodies are buried beneath his house's backyard. We heard that the man was sentenced to 25 years of prison for breaking into people's houses and murdering. Until this day, the sight of the man holding the knife chasing me was still unforgettable. I really hope he won't return to the city anymore. Hello, I'm Jenny. This is a memory that I have from my childhood that still to this day I have no idea what it was. So, I was born in Texas, raised in Mexico, and my parents wanted me to stay in Mexico. I grew up with my grandma, but I never knew my grandpa at the time. But it was the first week of school, and I was 3 years old at the time and had to go to school. When I was in school and finished my classes, I always went to these arcade games with some friends. But my grandma always got mad at me because I returned so late, like around 10 p.m. or 11 p.m., and I also had school the next day. One day, I went to school and then to the arcade games with my friends, and I'm not gonna lie, it was 1 a.m., and my grandma was waiting for me. But she said, "If you return late again, the weeping woman will come and get you." Honestly, I never believed in anything paranormal or ghost, so I didn't care. For those who don't know, the weeping woman is a legend that goes on in Mexico, and in Mexico they call her La Loria. But she caught her husband cheating, so she grabbed her children and drowned them, and she also drowned herself. And there's a rumor that she can be heard at night crying, saying, "Where are my children? Oh, my children." So one day, it was a Friday, and I went to school as usual. My friend said if I wanted to go to the arcade games because they were going to celebrate one of my friend's birthday. So I did, and then it went past 12 p.m., and I told my friends I was leaving because I didn't want my grandma to get mad at me again. So I was walking, and in Mexico, there's not that much lighting, so it was pretty dark. I noticed that one of my friends that went to school was with a lady in a white dress, but she had long black hair and she was really pretty. So I passed them and said, "Good evening." But my friend and the lady didn't answer. I thought it was pretty rude, and they were walking to the very dark street, so I said, they probably having a bad day, and continue walking. So I went to my house, and my grandma was sitting in the couch waiting for me as usual, and I decided to tell her, but she didn't respond to me. She just stared at me. So I took a shower and went to sleep. The next day, my grandma told me to go buy vegetables to make breakfast. So I grabbed the bag that she handed me and went to the grocery store. When I was in the grocery store, I was about to check out, and I saw a sign about my friend that I saw last night, and my friend was missing. And I asked the lady who was checking me out, "Ma'am, what happened to that kid that went missing?" She said, "This lady in a white dress with black hair took him to the lake and drowned him." My heart dropped, and then I said, "What happened to the lady?" She said, "The police was looking for her but never found her. Also, there has been reports of kids going missing." I didn't know what to say, so I just paid the lady and grabbed the things I bought. I went home and told my grandma, was in complete shock. So then she said, "That happens to the kids that are bad. That woman is not human." So then I told my grandma, "Grandma, stop telling me those things. I don't believe in anything of that." I was getting a little mad, but she said this, "You'll see someday, and you will believe." So I went to my room and said, "Yeah, sure." At night, I finished my homework and went to sleep. But around 3 a.m., I was hearing a woman crying and screaming at the top of her lungs. So then I heard, "My children!" I got up, looked at the window. I couldn't believe my eyes. There she was. The same lady I saw with my friend was right there. She didn't see me, but she went to the very dark street that I saw her go with my friend that went missing. I hid under my covers and fell asleep. In the morning, I told my grandma, and she believed me. I said, "Grandma, you're right. I saw her last night." She said, "I told you she's real." So then months passed and I haven't seen her. Unfortunately, my grandma passed away. In fact, I went back to Texas and stayed there. I'm 17 years old now, and I can't never get that memory out of my head.
This story took place many years ago. I grew up in a pretty small neighborhood, and I pretty much knew everyone who lived around me. Our house was at the very end of the street. At the other end was a popular park that everyone, especially children, went to. My sister loved to go on walks very late at night, and would usually go to the swing set at the park and swing there for a while, because nobody else would be around to bother her. The park layout had the playground next to a path that led into a wooded area, with the only light source coming from a building next to the swing set. One night, maybe around 1 or 2 a.m., my sister walked down to the park. She was swinging for maybe about 10 minutes when she felt something was wrong. It was that unmistakable feeling you get when you feel like you're being watched. She didn't think much of it until this random guy seemed to come out of nowhere and sat on the swing next to her. This stranger kept trying to make conversation. He kept asking her if she lived around the park and how old she was. Around this time, my sister was 18 or 19 years old and was fairly small, and she looked a lot younger for her age. She didn't want to be around the swings anymore, so she texted me, telling me to call her. I was very confused, but I could just tell that something was wrong. I called her and she picked up very quickly. I asked her what was going on. "Oh, you need me home? I'll be there right away." This further confused me. I could then hear her telling someone that she had to go. As soon as she walked far enough away, she explained everything to me. She walked up the concrete steps that led into the parking lot, and before she crossed the street, she looked back, and to her absolute horror, she noticed 3 other figures had emerged out of the woods. Each seemed to be carrying some sort of weapon. She immediately turned back and ran home, turning a 2-minute walk into 30 seconds. She slammed the door shut and locked it immediately as soon as she got back. My sister doesn't scare easy, but this was one of the only times I had ever seen her truly frightened. I don't like thinking about what would have happened if she didn't leave that situation when she did. She was mere seconds away from being ambushed. After that night, she no longer went on her late walks to the park, and now always carries a pocket knife for her protection.
It all started back in 2013 when me and my friend and his parents went on a cruise ship to celebrate his 13th birthday party. I was 14. My parents couldn't come because they were attending a wedding in California. We were going to catch a cruise ship from Florida to Puerto Rico, as we were Americans from Wisconsin and lived in Florida, and my friend's family was actually from Puerto Rico. Once we got on the cruise ship, we settled into our rooms and went to dinner that night in the cruise ship dining hall. My friend and I went back to our room. On our way there, we noticed a creepy man in the dark corner of the corridor. When he noticed us, he smiled in a creepy way, and we went to our rooms frightened. I had fallen asleep and realized his parents still weren't home, and there was someone knocking at the door. His parents finally arrived, so I woke my friend up because I wanted him to come with me to the dining hall to get some water. It was around 3 a.m. Suddenly, we heard some footsteps behind us in the dark cruise ship's dining hall, and we noticed the same man coming towards us with a knife and the most brutal smile on his face. He started running towards us, but I couldn't move. I was frozen in fear. Just in the nick of time, my friend smashed a glass bottle over his head, and he passed out. We rushed back to our rooms and told my friend's parents about what happened. They locked us in our room for our own safety and then went to the security room to explain everything. The man was lying there on the floor, and they managed to arrest him. It turns out he was a serial killer that loved to kill people, especially children. It turns out that he also threw the bodies of the children that he killed overboard in his previous travels on cruise ships. He also had a fake identity. When we came back to the U.S., we heard the news that the man got sentenced to life in prison and that he could get the death penalty at any time. We are never going to catch a cruise ship again for our own good.
This story happened in 2015. I used to live in an apartment complex in Kansas City, Missouri. The place was kind of in the hood. The people there would sit and smoke weed in front of the building and do drug deals in broad daylight. Nobody cared about anything, and the management ignored all of the issues going on there. Other than that, it was like any other apartment complex. One day that all changed, however. The complex had a pool that all the residents would use. It was a decently sized pool, and it was next to the gym. It was a hot day in the summer, so I went to the pool with my mom. We got to the pool and we sat down with our towels and we got ready to swim. We started swimming when all of a sudden we hear some kids saying, "Oh my God, it's got a gun!" At first, I thought they were just messing around and talking about a water gun or something. But I quickly realized that they weren't joking. Then I heard 2 men arguing. I looked over at the edge of the pool to see a man with a gun following another man to his car. I didn't really understand what they were arguing about and yelling about. All of a sudden, I hear 2 gunshots. I had an instant panic attack. and I thought we were all going to die, so I hopped out of the water and I ran for my life. My mom and I hauled ass out of the pool, and I called my dad to open the door to our apartment. We get inside and I start breaking down because at the same time I'm only 13 years old and I've never experienced something like this. The police arrive and tell us that the guy with the guns shot the other man because he stole drugs from him. The man survived because the bullets grazed his ear and just barely missed his head. This experience scarred me for a little bit, and it caused me to have anxiety whenever I go into a public place. My family ended up moving out of this apartment and buying a house in a different town. This experience really showed me that anything could happen at any time.
Hi, my name's Blessing. I live in the Philippines. This happened when I was in 6th grade. I was at my school and eating my lunch with my 2 classmates, Miguel and Riza. After we ate, we thought about taking a walk around, so we went to a building at our school and went up to the top floor, the 4th floor. In the building we went to, there was another building in front of it, and it hadn't been used by the students because it was newly built. Anyway, back to the story. We were on the 4th floor overlooking the buildings and trees around the campus and getting some fresh air. After an hour, we decided to go back to our classroom so that we wouldn't be late for our class. As I was walking, I looked at the building opposite to us, and I saw a boy running around the classroom. He looked like he was a 3rd grader. I wondered why there was a student in there because, as I said a while ago, it couldn't be used yet. Another reason is that the doors to enter there were also locked. And while the boy was running around, I was carefully watching him. I did not expect what happened next. The boy ran straight into the wall, and I thought he would be hurt. But no, he disappeared after he bumped into the wall. My eyes widened in shock. So I told Miguel and Riza to hurry back to our classroom. After that day, I could not get that boy out of my mind. A few weeks later, as I was going to school, I heard rumors about the boy who was always seen by our school security guard every night when he was walking around the campus. After I heard about that, I remembered the boy I saw who ran into the wall. I thought I was daydreaming, but what I saw was definitely true. Until now, it remains a mystery to me who that boy was and why he was in that building. One more thing. Our school used to be a burial place for the dead during the Spanish period.
This story goes way back to 1998, when I was 16 years old. I was hanging out with a couple of friends of mine, who I will call Ben and Jake. It was a late summer evening on a Saturday, and I was sitting in my room listening to some 80s rock albums, as teenagers would normally do back then. After a while, I got bored and went outside to meet up with my friends. We ended up chilling in Ben's garage, drinking beer and smoking pot. I can't remember exactly how, but we wound up walking down this narrow path by the woods and towards the lake. I guess we got bored of sitting around and went out to go do something. So back in '98, there was this popular hangout spot for teenagers in my neighborhood. So we were hoping to see some other kids there, but when we arrived, we were met with nothing but the sound of crickets. Bummer. So we sat on the bench for a while and just talked for about 15 minutes. Then Jake got the idea to go to an abandoned 2-story boathouse that was by the lake. We had nothing better to do, so we agreed. We soon entered the boathouse and started to explore. I just sort of stood there while Jake and Ben were going around breaking shit. I felt very uncomfortable, and I couldn't quite shake the feeling that we were being watched. We went upstairs where there was an old wooden boat lying there with a fishing net over it. While checking it out, from downstairs we all heard the wooden door to the boathouse creak open, followed by heavy footsteps. We all froze in place and listened carefully. There was around a 5-second break when we heard a terrifying voice call out to us.
I know you're here. Come out, wherever you are.
The heavy footsteps started to walk towards the stairs as the old floorboards creaked and moaned. Jake went inside the wooden boat, and Ben and I followed. We put the fishing net over our heads and didn't move. The footsteps soon reached the top of the stairs.
I can hear you.
We were all as still as cadavers as we sat there and listened to this deranged person stumble around, looking for us. I contemplated a plan of escape without being caught, but there was just no way for the three of us to make it past him. And he was closing in on us. We were literally like sitting ducks. The man moved out of sight when he entered a small room adjacent to the boat. We suddenly ripped off the fishing net and made a break for it.
There you are,
the man said as he emerged from the room and rushed at Jake. But Jake reacted very quickly and shoved the man, sending him toppling over. We all ran like hell out of there and through the tall grass into the woods. We heard the man give chase, but he eventually gave up. We all went back to Ben's garage and fell onto the couch in exhaustion. Jake then told us that he saw a knife in the man's hand as he fell over. Ben and I sat there in utter shock. Did that fucking maniac really plan on killing us in that old boathouse? To this day, I can't help but wonder, what would have happened to us if Jake hadn't reacted so quickly?
This is a true story that happened to my older brother Matthew. Matthew was just 16 years old when this happened. And just to let you know, Matthew wasn't strongly built, but had a pretty face and was popular with other kids at school. He did not believe in ghosts or any supernatural beings. He was a brave brother who would protect me when I was in danger. Anyways, my brother told me this about a week after the incident. He came back after a long day at school, sat on the couch for a little bit just to unwind, and had about an hour break. After that, the usual, he did his homework, studied a bit, talked to some of his friends, he ate his dinner, and went to bed around 12 a.m. after watching a movie. He woke up around 3:40 a.m. because he was thirsty and wanted a glass of water, so he headed downstairs towards the kitchen. As he was coming back up the stairs with the bottle of water, he saw a young boy on the staircase. He got a bit freaked out and just froze and stood there. A minute passed by when Matthew suddenly fell on the ground, face towards the wall and covered in sweat. He couldn't let out a scream. He was just lying there. He could now see the boy on top of him, and Matthew could clearly see the boy's face with the help of the moonlight that came from the window. The boy did not have any eyelids or eyebrows. It was just 2 red dots on his face. It didn't have any lips, just a crack across his face. And he smiled ear to ear with sharp teeth. My brother was truly terrified. The creature was now face to face with Matthew. The creature was breathing heavily, mumbling words he couldn't understand. Suddenly and painfully, he bit into Matthew's neck and passed out. He woke up on his bed the next morning. He went to brush his teeth, and he saw in the reflection a red bruise on his neck. He had told Mom and Dad about what he had seen last night, but they just blew him off and said he probably had a nightmare, or maybe some big bug bit him. He confided in me because he knew that I would at least believe him. Of course I did. He was my brave brother. Nowadays, he would feel extremely cold and fall sick every now and then. The doctors told us that he was affected by the lockdown and needs to go out once in a while. I'm extremely worried for him, and I hope the creature that had haunted him that night isn't responsible for his illness. My name is Justina, and this story happened at my friend's house. It was finally the day. I was going to my best friend's house for a sleepover. Her name is Christina, and she had a really cute small dog. She was already standing in front of the house waiting for me. When I came to see her, she rushed to open the door so we can watch TikTok and play video games all night. We were the type of girls who would eat popcorn, watch scary movies, and play video games. It was around 11 p.m., and we were bored, so Christina said, "Want to play hide and seek in the dark?" I wasn't really sure, because I'm pretty scared after watching so many scary movies, but I said yes, so she wouldn't be sad. "Okay," I said, "I'll go hide, and you start counting to 20. I started to count. 1, 2, 3, time passes by. 9, 10, 11. I opened my eyes a bit just to see if I can see her, but then I had to stop counting because I had a feeling that something was behind the bed. I couldn't really see it, but it looked really dark. I was kind of naive at the time, and I wanted to look behind the bed to see what was there. I was so close to it, and I could almost see its face. But then Christina shouted, "Hey, why did you stop counting? What happened?" No, everything's fine," I said. "I was just thinking about something." I lied to her so she wouldn't be scared. I didn't know I did a big mistake by talking so loudly. The thing turned her head at me, and she was covered in blood. I saw she was eating Christina's dog. I screamed so loudly, and Christina rushed to the bedroom. When she came, she screamed too because she saw her dead dog. The creature was already gone, and I wanted to tell her what I saw, but right at that time, a glass fell from the kitchen table. It was so loud in that quiet house. We both screamed and ran into the kitchen so fast we almost fell down the stairs. We turned on the lights in the kitchen, and we saw the broken glass. We were so terrified that we hid under the sofa. Christina was under the sofa already, and I was coming behind her. But suddenly, all the cabinets in the kitchen opened, and we both screamed and ran under the sofa. 5 minutes later, we saw some shadows of someone. We thought it might be Christina's parents, so we started to feel better. But the creature came, and we suddenly saw its legs. Christina was about to scream again, so I quickly covered her mouth with my hand. The lights were on, so I could finally see its legs. They were really dark and slimy. It was summertime, so we always left the door to the garden open. The creature stood in the middle of the kitchen for 3 minutes and went to the garden and ran away. We were under the sofa for another 10 minutes, and then we slowly got out from under it. We didn't hear or see anything, so we quickly took our phones and ran to Christina's neighborhood house. We called Christina's parents, but they didn't believe us. Christina's parents came home, and we cried all night, and we were hiding under our blankets. And yeah, if you're wondering what happened to Christina's dog, well, he wasn't there. He just disappeared, even though I know the creature ate it all. I wonder what would have happened if I didn't cover Christina's mouth under the sofa when the creature saw us. Would we be dead? This is a story that my grandfather once told me. He was pretty young at the time and was working for a company earning a handsome salary. Well, one day he decided to go for an outing just to get rid of the hectic schedule. The place he visited was situated at a hilltop. He was mesmerized by the beauty and was feeling the absolute peace over there. It was a 4-day trip, and he wanted to enjoy it to the fullest. He enjoyed the sightseeing and visited places suggested by local people and his friends. On the 3rd day, he thought he would have a little walk around, so he woke up early and went out. The weather was absolutely refreshing. He walked around for about 20 minutes and suddenly realized he had to return back. When he turned back, he saw a road that went into the forest. How come I didn't notice that, he thought, and became curious about the path. While he was walking, he suddenly saw a dense fog getting accumulated in front of him. It was impossible to see anything. He thought not to take any risk and returned back to the original road. But he saw a man sitting on one rock just in front of him. Surprisingly, it was impossible to see anything through the mist, but that figure became more and more prominent as he approached. My grandfather asked the man, "What's your name? Where are you from?" The figure looked up. He had a creepy smile on his face, and his eyes were a bit larger than usual. He said he was a local person of that area, and his name was John, for the sake of the story. He also said he had no job and was very upset. They were having a good chat, but suddenly my grandfather realized it was too late and he should head back. But as he stood up, John held his hands and gave him quite a frightening scare. His face became more prominent, and his face was covered with blood and scars. My grandfather fainted after he saw that. After some time, some people came to see the condition and took him to the hospital. They asked my grandfather, "What were you doing at the suicide point? Did you know that if you had taken one step forward, you would have died?" My grandpa explained the entire incident to them. He was terrified by the whole thing. But after he heard that, he turned pale. John, who he had met, already died a few years ago at the suicide point. He jumped from the hilltop and gave up his life. My grandpa said, "What would have happened if I had not escaped by the local people at that time?"
Me and my cousins always found ways to try new things. We loved to try out new challenges and trends on the internet. This happened during the summer holidays when me and my cousins were hanging out at one of our houses. Bored, we decided to try out a new game one of my cousins had found on the internet. It was called Charlie Charlie. It was basically like the Ouija board, but a lot easier to play. You need 2 pencils, a paper, and a dark room to play it. The pencils were placed as a cross on the middle of the paper that was divided into 4 columns. In the columns, yes and no were written diagonally. To play, we'd have to chant, "Charlie, Charlie, are you there?" until we get a reply. If we get a reply as a yes, we can ask Charlie questions, to which they would reply yes or no to the question when the pencil points to the no or yes. There were 5 of us, and we chanted the phrase many times, expecting a reply. We played from the living room, as it was less creepy and big. Then we started pranking each other by blowing on the pencil. After a while, we gave up. When the boys went to play on the PlayStation, me and another one of my cousins decided to play the game once more, just for fun. We chanted the phrase and asked questions without getting any replies. Tired and disheartened because of not getting any replies, after a while, we decided to go to sleep. We left the game as it was on the table and headed to bed. After a while, I woke up feeling extremely thirsty, which was unusual to me. On my way to the refrigerator, I saw a light coming from the living room, as if someone's flashlight was on. Confused, I went to investigate. I saw my youngest cousin among us sitting at the table talking to someone. I called out to him and startled him. He was excited to see me and cheerfully remarked, "Look, it's Charlie." I felt as if my heart dropped down to the floor. I yelled at him for trying to prank me and ordered him to go back to sleep. Grunting, he took the flashlight away and went to his room. When I looked at the paper, I saw the pencil pointing to yes. I took the pencils off of it and crumpled the paper up, throwing it in the bin. I headed back to the refrigerator to drink my water when I saw my youngest cousin standing in front of it with his flashlight. He was just standing there, staring into the fridge. I went to him and touched his shoulder, which felt awfully cold. Right when I was about to ask him if he was okay, my youngest cousin called from behind me, asking if I saw his flashlight. My heart started pounding as I took my hand off of the thing standing in front of me. It turned back, revealing its rotten teeth and gouged-in eyes, and muttered, Hi, I'm Charlie. The next thing I remember is waking up on the floor with my cousins and grandmother surrounding me. To avoid confusion, I told them I was too tired and passed out on the floor. Still traumatized by the past day's experience, I calmed myself down that it was a dream. Upon entering the living room, I saw the paper and pencils that I have discarded right there in its initial position. This time, the pencil pointing to no.
My name is Maggie. This is about a dream I had when I was around 6 years old. I was living with my mom, my dad, and my brother at the time. There was one night that I had gotten ready for bed and went to sleep in my room. In my dream, I was hiking on a snowy biome. It was a tall mountain. In my dream, there was this drug or virus called Turbo. It made you go crazy and want to get other people to have it too. I was with two friends. One of my friends was a brunette girl, and she had glasses. The other was a boy with brown hair. We were hiking and found a building close to the top. My friends and I had all smiled and hoped to find some place to sleep. We had reached it and finally went in. I screamed and hugged one of my friends when we saw an alien-like creature. The creature then grabbed me by my wrist and led me into a room. "Inject her with Turbo," it said. I looked and saw that there were people behind me. The creature threw me to the ground and left the room. I screamed and kicked. I could hear my friends trying to reason with these creatures. The people held me down, and I had gotten away and kicked them. I heard commotion coming from another room. Then it went silent. My friends soon came into the room and hugged me. I looked behind me to see a friend that had a needle with blue liquid. I kicked my friend and pushed her. I couldn't resist crying and sat in the corner with blankets and cried. Hours later, my mom came under the blankets with me. I cried and hugged her so tight. My mom looked a little different. She looked pale and skinny. I really didn't notice, so I kept hugging her. I soon started to feel sick and told my mom, "I'll be back with medicine," she said. I sat down and threw up in a bucket. My mom came back under the blanket and gave me a dose of blue medicine. Before I took it, a strike of memory hit me and I pushed it away. My mom insisted on giving it to me. I grabbed the bottle and looked at it. I screamed at my mom in disbelief. "This is not medicine, Mom. It's Turbo." I yelled and kicked and screamed. My mom put her hand over my mouth and I cried. She said, "Turbo makes me feel good." I yelled and kicked her in the stomach and ran away. My friend grabbed me and they held me down. I remember feeling woozy and I felt the pain of the drug being injected into my body. And as I woke up, this dream kept replaying over and over until one day it stopped. The weird thing about it is that I have a scar where they stabbed the needle in my skin.